when I accept these people as they are, so I learn more from them. I've never had this thing of fault finding, because fault finding is a very easy thing to do. You don't need an education for it.
Correct. The first steps that we took, our mother watching, nourishing us, for us to walk, run, and fly, to embrace the future. We get into schools and colleges. We graduate from our alma mater, the nourishing mother again. What do we become? We become alma mentors to contribute in other people's lives and create an impact for growth, for happiness, for joy. That's who we are. My name is Rajiv. I represent Alma Mentor as a founder, and I'll be bringing more stories for you. All right, welcome to this first vlog of mine. My name is Rajiv, and I am a guy who likes to travel. So you would see my ID as Homebound Traveler on Facebook, on Instagram, and there's another ID which is Alma Mentor, which is a group of people in my life who have given a lot of contribution to help me move forward. So that is why I have named my group as Alma Mentor, and all those who are working with me, all those who are associated with me in their lives, they've been contributing in others' life. And I have been on Facebook for quite a while. I never expected that someone like Mr. C.V. Prakash, Lieutenant Commander C.V. Prakash, retired Navy officer, would send me a friend request, and I was like taken aback. Who is this man sending me a friend request on Facebook? And this is 12 years ago that I'm talking about. And I went into his profile. I looked up what is there common between him and me, and how did we get connected here. So I see that there's one person both of us used to follow and still following. His name is Swami Uditya Chaitanya ji, and I've been listening to his discourses for a long while, and that is one common interest or one common person between both of us. So then I look up his photos and what he's actually doing in his life, and then I see a lot of greenery in his photo albums, which I love. I love to see green everywhere. I love to see farmers. I am very emotional about farmers' life, and because they are giving us food, they are growing food and they are giving us food. Food is energy, and I really believe in something called as our internal energy, because all of us are energies, and how we channelize our energy, what we do with it, that really matters in the whole journey of our life, in the purpose of our life. It's not just about surviving, it has to be about living, and living with a purpose, to thrive ahead and to move forward and contribute our actions, with our ideas, our beliefs in somebody else's life, so that they can also grow with us. And I really believe in this principle called as together is better. So when I looked at CV Sir's entire photo albums, then I got to know that this man is into farming, agriculture. So that is another reason for me to connect with CV Sir. And I always wanted to, I started thinking about this whole idea of going there and meeting this man, because he's doing some amazing work here. I really didn't know. I didn't have any idea what he's actually doing, what kind of farming he is doing. But I just wanted to meet him. When I explored his photo albums on the Facebook, and I started following his journey for 12 years, and I always been wanting to meet him. Finally the day is here, and because I love connecting with authenticity in everything. This person is such an amazing gentleman. We got a chance to interact with each other a year ago. We thought of touching on some professional work. I always had this idea of helping him out to take his messages, to take his journey and show it to rest of the world who are not aware of what he is doing. But because I didn't know what he's actually doing, I thought of meeting him personally first, understanding what is happening out here, and I was really getting very curious and excited to meet him. This man is a crazy man. He is a maverick. Whatever I've understood with my interactions, whatever I've interacted with him on WhatsApp chats, we've got a lot of chats happening on WhatsApp, sometimes on Facebook, and some few calls. That's all we had, and I could feel that there is this aura around him. There is something in him which is driving him to contribute for a better world. And especially the maverick in him is kind of an enigma unto himself and unto the others also. So it really made me very excited, and I'm very happy. Finally, I'm here. I took a tour of this place. This is the training center out here. It's in Chikkasandra, Bangalore. I took a very nice tour of this place, and I was really curious. And I asked those people, who is this guy who is helping you out and making you a very authentic and modern farmer? And then eventually they told me where he sits and when I can meet him. And finally, I'm here. So we have Lieutenant Commander CV Prakash with me finally, and I'm very happy to meet you, CV sir. It is pure joy in my heart, and if I die, I will die with a sense of pride that I met you, a man who has served a nation in the Indian Navy, and now he's again serving the whole nation, and in fact I should say the Mother Earth, by making authentic scientific farmers who can grow good and clean food using soilless farming techniques. And I am amazed by his journey. So I'm here. I'm going to introduce this man a little bit. He's been in Navy. He has served our country, and after retiring from Navy voluntarily, he has taken up another mission to help the humanity. So he is one person who would like to contribute for others, for their betterment. So I'm gonna ask CV sir to start off with his intro. I know that he can do it better than what I told him. I know he is much more than what he is actually. Sometimes I feel that, I mean, I've heard him saying that he is beyond Ananda. So CV sir, please
Yeah.
tell us something about how was your childhood, how was your life before embarking on the journey that you took. When you realize that you are this kind of a person, of an enigma unto yourself. When did you realize that? What was your childhood like?
Yeah.
And we would like to have our audience inspired and take away a lot from you.
You see, Rajiv, and like I always tell you, I'm not just an enigma for you. I'm an enigma unto myself. And I've been a maverick, I think, right from the time I remember. And my memories are fresh. When I was a child, I was a very different kind of a child. And I always swam against the tide. I was a kind of a rebel, in the sense, not rebel as in a rebel, not a Che Guevara or something, but I always wanted to do things differently. I realized when I was very young that only dead fish go with the flow. Only dead fish go with the flow. But I always swam against the flow because somewhere in my mind I always wanted to be different. Whatever I do, I should be different. My school days were also similar. Even today, my peers, my old counterparts, my seniors, my juniors, on occasions when they meet me or they're on the WhatsApp group or something, they always say, CV, you were such a different student. My seniors say, you were a very different boy. My time in the school also was very different. I studied in a sort of military school called the Sainik School, Bijapur, which is, we have many Sainik schools in all states. And the aim of the Sainik schools happened to be sending people to the National Defense Academy, or they wanted more people to join the Indian Armed Forces. So having said that, I was very different in school. My seniors, my juniors who knew me, my counterparts and peers, they always say, CV, you always stood out among the crowd in everything that you did. I had, right from my childhood, I've always had this thing that when you do something, you do it right. You are never wrong in doing the right thing. So I have been propelled, and as a child, before I even joined Sainik School, I remember from when I was possibly 4 years old, my mom says, see, Vishy, they call me Vishy at home, so Vishy, if you found a piece of paper just lying on the ground, you would take and read. You had this habit of reading. You would want to know, it could be a packet of salt, but you would read the entire thing. If you took a newspaper, you would read the entire newspaper from first page to last page. So my dad was in the Air Force, so he was posted in Indian Air Force station in Lohegaon, Pune. And those days, of course, was very different. I'm talking of the I'm talking the late 60s, if I might say that, say 69, 68, 67. But I was born in 62. So we had a wonderful library at the Air Force Officers Mess. And I sometimes cannot believe that before I was 9 years old, I had read about Egyptian civilization, the Mayan civilization. I had read so much of history. And I was a reader, and I was always hungry for knowledge. Like I said, my father was in the Indian Air Force, and he was serving at the Indian Air Force Station in Lohegaon, Pune, in the late 60s. I mean, from 66 to about 69, 70, he was in Pune. And I, as a child, I always liked to read books, and I was hungry for information and knowledge. And I would devour the entire library that was there in the Air Force Station in the officers' mess. They had a beautiful little library in those days, and I read through Mayan civilization, I read through Egyptian, Persian civilization, I read about Indus Valley civilization, I read about evolution of man, and so many different things at a very, very young age. I cannot believe that I read books on psychiatry, psychology, and I don't know what all I read. And because of all that reading and that habit stays still today, I've never found myself lonely in a crowd.
Because you are a well-read man.
Means
Well informed.
I will never say that I'm a well-read man because there's more to read. So I am a read man, not well-read, because well-read, in my opinion, would be having read every book in the world. But okay, yes, in a way, what you say is right. I had this hunger for information and knowledge, and they came in handy throughout my life. Even to this day, many of the things that I've read, you must have heard me in other conversations. I keep using certain words and phrases and things like that. They don't come just what I learned yesterday. These are things that I've learned over a period of time. As we speak, I'm touching 58, and my journey is not yet over. I still have a lot to do. I have miles to go before I sleep. So the thing is, okay, that was my school days, and then in school also I used to be an avid reader. Reading has never left me. I still read at least a page or two and every day, maybe on the internet or maybe through a book or whatever. Of course, in the recent years I've been a bit too busy, and my reading has not totally gone, but I don't really.
Sir, on that note, what's the latest book have you read?
I reread actually one book that has always been my great favorite. It's called The Tao of Physics, written by Fritjof Capra. And I like that book because he shows us how science and spirituality converge at different places and diverge as well. And they keep meeting each other, sometimes they are happy with each other, sometimes they agree to disagree. And that book is something that I recommend to the whole world. It's such a phenomenal book, The Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. It's a book that I would want everyone to read because it's such an amazing book. So anyway, I've read a lot of books, and I used to read John Steinbeck. I used to read all these Nobel Prize winners and others. The first funny thing at school was, whenever a new book came to the library, the teachers obviously got the privilege of reading those books first. So I remember I had a very great Hindi teacher, and he used to read a lot of good books in English, and all great books. Like once there was a war by Galbraith, or Love in the Times of Cholera, those kind of books. So my Hindi teacher, when he used to come to class, he would come with the book, and he would keep that book and his duster and his chalk and all. And I used to sit in the front chair in all my life, or rather the front desk. So my curiosity always, I used to look like this and say, which book is it now? So when the class is over, I would go running behind him. Sir, can I borrow the book after you return it in the library? Then maybe if he has already promised to some other teacher, I would obviously be the student, so I would get the last preference. But I would definitely read it, because if Dharampal sir, my Hindi teacher, was reading a book, it definitely must be a good book.
Right.
I'm very sorry that I loved him so much, and he passed away 2 years ago. And he was such an amazing man. And just before he passed away, 6 months before he passed away, it was so funny. We got on a chat and on Facebook Messenger, and he told me some things about my childhood, and he remembered how I was an avid reader. We reminisced about our old time, going back in the 70s, and then I told him which books more than 35 books I will still remember 35 books which I remembered like that. I wrote all of them on that Facebook Messenger and said, "Sir, these are the books you read, and I read it after you." And he said, "You got a great memory, boy."
Nice.
I said, "Of course, sir. These books are books that molded my life. These books molded me. Who I am today is is one of the things that actually make me today has made me today is my habit of reading and this quest for information and knowledge that has actually led me to where I am. My personality, who I am, is one of the things is directly related to books. So I always tell my young people in the society, we see a lot of young people very confused, they're very talented, but they're very confused what to do. They don't seem to find their objective. They don't seem to find their calling. So when I talk to these young people, I tell them what you become in your life or your personality that you're built for yourself. A man who travels widely, a man who keeps great friends, and people who discuss ideas, and people who read books. That these three things make the personality of a person. See, in my life, I've been to so many countries in my life. I worked with so many nationalities, people from different. It's like melting pots, as we call them, of civilization. My acceptance of people comes so easily only because I have actually seen people. I know they come from different diverse backgrounds, cultures, traditions, and when I accept these people as they are, so I learn more from them. I've never had this thing of fault finding, because fault finding is a very easy thing to do. You don't need an education for it.
Correct. So you mentioned about those 30 books that you read, and I'm sure we have a good audience out here who will be watching, and if they would like to know, I would definitely take that list from you. And
Yeah.
I would put that
Separately.
in the
Yeah.
description of this video, so
Yes.
that people can
Oh yes.
look at the names.
Oh yes. I will be very happy to tell you the names of those books, because those books really mold people. They shift the paradigms that we are, our dogmas, our beliefs. You see, what we are is because of our circumstances of our life. Who are my teachers? What are the circumstances and events that I passed through in my life? The good times, the bad times, right? We all have our histories, right? We all have never been always all right. We've had our, we have had our share of sorrows, joys, so many different incidents and things that have taught us many things. So everything, the people you come across, the books you read, the events and circumstances of your life, all these things actually make you who you are.
It sums up into an experience,
Yes.
an overall experience.
You are the sum of all your experiences. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So that was my life in school, and then that is a part of me. I liked acting, debating. I was a very good elocutionist. I used to win prizes, and drama. When I passed out of my school, I acted every year because every year the language of the drama is different. Once it's Hindi, next year it used to be Kannada, and the next year it used to be in English. So the year I was passing out, it happened to be English drama, and I was Lord Macbeth, Shakespearean play, and I couldn't believe that I actually won the Best Actor prize. And even today, if you personally people meet me, I'm still an actor. I mean, I throw my hands and legs, and I'm all expressive about things, and the child in me, and that I talk with, the child in me has not died.
The dramatics of the theater comes naturally to you.
I mean, I don't know how, but I'm dramatic. I was a very good, I could mimic people, and possibly because I used to be observant, maybe. But of course, I don't watch everybody like that. But if something interests me about someone, I would just, sort of watch him for 15-20 minutes. And to be honest with you, my elder daughter, Devika, she's exactly like her dad. She just has to see people, watch people, and then she said, "Dad, the uncle who came home, he walks like this, he speaks like this," and it's so nice, because it's fun. Yeah, okay, that's that part of my story in the school and things like that. And then I moved on to the National Defence Academy. I joined the National Defence Academy in January 1980, and
I remember telling me a story about how you landed up in NBA.
Oh yes, that should I tell that story here? Yeah, I can.
Why not?
See, the funny thing was, I was a very good student in my school. I was always on the top 5 in school, in my class. And, as I said, the aim of the Sainik School is to send people to the National Defence Academy, as many as possible in every batch. To be honest with you, to be really honest with my audience here, I wanted to be a cardiac surgeon in my life. My greatest interest was to be a doctor and be a very good doctor and do some amazing cardiac surgeries and help people. Okay, so what happens is when we get to write NDA exams, if you fail 3-4 times based upon your age, band of that age group. To be honest, guys, it was an objective. Those days it had just turned to objective questions. So it was A, B, C, D, and whatever. So I go to Vidhana Saudha, Bangalore, where my exams were being held, and the rule was you cannot leave the exam hall in the first 30 minutes. You got to you compulsorily sit 30 minutes. So my dad had just given me a new watch. So I was very proud of my little digital watch. It was from abroad somewhere. So I was waiting like 29. No, sorry. Yeah, 29, and then 29, then 30. And I would hand over my paper. I would tick whatever I felt like. I know, obviously, if you tick anything just like that, you're not going to pass. And I didn't want to pass. So I failed the exam.
Because you never wanted to be part of NDA.
I didn't want to go to the armed forces.
Okay.
My calling that point in time in my life was to become a doctor and learn wherever, whether in India or abroad, wherever. And there again, my thought was, because I had read books on people suffering, health, and all that. Those were topics that really interested me. And in fact, today, again, if you come to look at it, what I do, my hydroponics or my soilless journey, is all about people's health, right?
Yeah.
But that calling came only in the last 20 years. I knew it. I could do something like that, but without being a doctor, I could do things for people, for humanity. So that was the day the results were announced, and I knew I had failed, and I had a smirk on my face. And when people looked at me and they said, how could CV fail in the exam and things like that. So I said, look guys, even I don't know, I really wrote well.
Some of the guys must be happy.
I mean,
anybody who was jealous about you.
No. I don't think anyone was jealous of me. I am not sure, because I never, because in my life I've had all emotions of my life. My classmates, of course, they were actually, they felt bad. How can CV miss? How didn't he pass this exam? But I didn't tell them what I did. I just said, guys, I wrote very well, but I don't know how I must have failed in this exam. So I left it at that, because I didn't want to reveal to anyone my dream of becoming a cardiac surgeon in my life, because I kept that close to my heart. So on that day, one of my maths teacher happened to be teaching in one of the 7th grade classes and mathematics, and because when the result is announced of the NDA exam, it's like a big breaking news in the school. Everyone comes to know, because of the notice board, these guys are passed, and teachers happy, distributing sweets, this, that happens, in school. So I don't know why my teacher mentioned in the class, he told the 7th standard students, and I was 11th standard or 12th standard, halfway down. Oh, CV, he's only good in school exams, he can't pass a competitive exam, and something he said. And I'm a people's man, so my juniors loved me a lot, and I used to look after them. I used to, sort of be mentoring them at that age of when I was so young. So one of the students came and said, sir, this man said, this teacher said this about you. I don't know what happened, it got my goat. I said, bro, I'm going to pass this exam. It was some kind of challenge that happened to me suddenly. It was that, because, okay, if I had failed, I don't think someone should have passed a remark like that about me. I mean, okay, my ego was hurt, let's be honest. My ego was hurt. So I walked at 12 o'clock, went to this teacher's house, because all the teachers live in the residential school. I knocked his door and he suddenly saw me and he was shocked at 12 o'clock. What are you doing here? So I told him, sir, this is what I heard. This is what I know, that you said this in school, in one of the 7th standard class or 7th grade. And I'm really hurt about what you said. To be honest with you, sir, I failed my first NDA purposely. I am going to pass the second NDA exam with flying colors, and I'll be joining the National Defence Academy. And rest is history. I joined the National Defence Academy. We are allowed to choose our services. So I was very high on the merit, or good on the merit list, because in those days, I'm talking 1980, there were 165,000 people who wrote the National Defence Academy exam, and only 300 get selected out of that finally. And it's not just passing the exam.
Right.
You got to go to the services selection board. You have to clear that. Then you got to clear your medicals. It's a long journey. And then I passed and I went and I did my 3 years in the National Defence Academy, and then I joined the Indian Navy. I went on to finishing my cadets time, my midshipman time. I passed my mids board. I was commissioned as a young officer at the age of possibly just 19 and a half, 20. I had a stripe on my shoulder, and a time came when I could. There was a what do you call a signal? What in civilian language say a circular. So a signal saying that how many people would wish to volunteer for the submarine branch. I wasted no time. I went to my senior and said, "Sir, I'm volunteering for the submarine." So, and my captain also was very happy. He said, "I wanted to be a submariner, but I didn't somehow make it. But you must go." And that was the most beautiful thing. I still remember it was a man who became the chief of naval staff at that time, later on, Admiral Vishnu Bhagwat. And he said, "Son, you must go and join the submarines." So that's how I joined the submarines. Even there, if you see, I could have continued to be honest, on a surface ship, like any warship or anything like that. But somehow, it's not to belittle those guys or surface guys. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be in a branch of the Navy where I'm doing something very different. My life is always wrought with danger, clear and present danger, as we call it. There's always danger, and submarining is not easy. It's one hell of a profession.
Yeah.
It calls for a lot of courage. It calls for a lot of quick thinking.
It's a totally different world.
It's a
out there.
totally different world. There are no windows in a submarine.
Yeah.
You're just in a cigar-shaped metal can.
Yeah.
And I served like that for many, many years. And then after about 14 years and 7 months, again, maverick that I am, I decided to put in my papers and leave the Indian Navy. And I didn't continue to do my 20 years so that I get a pension. But when I left, after I left, life was not so easy because civilian world was very different.
Moving from the disciplined world to the
I wouldn't call that, I should not make that remark that civilians are indisciplined. But we are regimentalized. The armed forces is something, our life is something that the outside world really doesn't know our life. They don't know what we put our lives on the line. We put our lives on the line. When we joined the armed forces, like all of us, or as ex-military people, we sign a blank check up to and beyond my life.
and that takes a lot of courage.
It takes a lot of courage. It's something that you cannot explain to a man who's never worn a uniform. It's hard to make people understand the value of camaraderie, the value of being together. Your buddy who's with you, you're fighting, and your buddy has been shot. The bullet's gone through, just next to you, shoulder to shoulder he is, and he's got a bullet gone through his body or his neck or his head. And you see a man you served with for so many years, he's like your brother, and he's gone. I get tears in my eyes when I speak this, because that is the kind of bonding that we have in the armed forces. So having said that, that was the journey. So Indian Navy was over. That Jai Jawan phase went off. Then I moved to Dubai. I was there for about 3 years. I worked. I did some things. I predominantly worked with the oil and gas industry in the logistics side of things. And then in 2000, I migrated to Australia because I'm a nomad. I don't like to be in one place all the time, and I like to explore new things. And I wanted to I thought, let me settle down in Australia so I learn more about Australia. From Australia, I go to New Zealand, Fiji, all these various islands there, and I'm an explorer.
How many countries have you visited, sir?
To be honest with you, only 64 countries.
Only 64.
I changed about 11 times. I changed passports because I should get full, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been lucky to have traveled quite a bit in this world. I've been to countries where nobody will ever even think of going. But work took me, especially when I was in Dubai and doing work with this oil and gas related company. I had to travel a lot. So I used to travel Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, all these countries where normally from India very few people go to those countries.
Right.
They'll always try to go to Singapore and the known ones.
Right.
But I was so lucky, my work took me to so many places. I was in Russia, and that was when the Navy sent me, so I saw Russia at that time. There's one country that I still haven't seen, and I was about to see it about 2 years back, but it was supposed to be a visit to Japan. But the client somehow wasn't ready for some reason, and that just filtered out and just went out. But I had the visa of Japan, so I would like proudly have a Japanese visa and all that. But I couldn't go. That's one country that I really, really want to visit in my lifetime because somehow I love Japan and I love the Japanese people.
Yeah.
They're one of the most beautiful people in the whole world.
Very disciplined and very hygienic.
Yes, very hygienic, very disciplined, very straight, and they don't jump into things like that. They're very process oriented, and I myself am that way, process oriented. So for me, Japan is another country that's always remained in my mind that I must see it someday. And in fact, to be honest with you, I was thinking of visiting Australia this year and via Japan.
Oh,
So that was my
nice.
plan actually, to go via Japan to Australia, because I have some very good Japanese friends whom I haven't seen
But
and
you-
some who I've seen.
Okay.
So they're all on my Facebook. So sometimes they come on Messenger and ask, CV, when are you coming to Japan? So yeah, so Japan is one country that I really, really want to visit. And
So what I understand here is that you've like traveled across the world,
Yeah.
64 countries, and that whole journey culminates into the personality, the maverick, the enigma. Because when you travel and when you go through a lot of cultures, a lot of socio-cultural interactions, when you have,
Oh, yes.
it gives you a very wide plethora of experience.
you become a worldly man or a man of the world. And I can get along with all kinds of people. All kinds of people. It doesn't really matter. And to be honest with you, wherever I've met people, I've only tried to see what I can learn from them.
Nice.
I've never had this ever got this feeling of being, that race and my race. I just don't like it. I just don't like it. As a person, I don't like racism of any kind, be it within my country or outside or whatever. I don't like racism. I don't like people analyzing people based on religion, based on caste, creed, color, how much money they have. Because for me, my religion is humanity. I don't see anything beyond it.
Nice.
For me, it is Vasudeva Kutumbam, as we say. Everyone should be together. We
The
are a
world is
family. The world is a family. And I also believe in what we say in Sanskrit, Loka Samastha Sukhino Bhavantu. Let the whole world be happy.
Right.
So, like I was just mentioning, I think in that little earlier, one of the emotions that I've never remembered having in my lifetime, and I'm so thankful that I didn't have that emotion by default or by design, is jealousy. So, like for example, I'm in the hydroponic industry. There's so many people now playing in this field. To be honest with you, I'm happy that there are so many people playing in this field, because only then it becomes an industry.
Nice.
And then I look at people, when I see people do well, in whatever way it is, I cannot not be happy. For me, seeing someone happy makes me happy. A person says, yeah, I bought this beautiful car, and I say, wow, I just feel so nice for him. I bought this beautiful house, I feel nice for him. I don't see any time in my life where I ever felt jealous of someone. And many people come to me and say, sir, in hydroponics there's already a lot of competition. So the one word I just can't take is competition. Because competition is what? Competition is basically energy
Yeah.
used to pull people down.
Right.
You would rather use that energy by creating your own space. Like I say always, the Blue Ocean Strategy. That's a great book that I read many years ago. So you create a space for yourself. You don't have to worry about the competition. Let people do what they do. You create a niche. You create a niche for yourself.
Right.
Years ago, many people said, when I came into India, they said, you're such a small man that people will eat you up. they'll finish you off. Big corporates will start teaching hydroponics and you'll be nothing.
Yeah.
I said, I have an objective, and if there are obstacles, I will find my way around them. I don't care. Because I'm not a competitor, I'm a creator. Till about as far back as 2 years ago, for the first 10 years, there was hardly, I don't remember a person teaching hydroponics in this country. There was no one creating anything, and there was no competition, if you can call it that. But somewhere in my mind, I knew a time has come when the curve is going to move exponentially, logarithmic movement.
Yeah. Before we take on that curve thing, I think we need to touch on that journey which moved towards Australia. So, what was the purpose behind visiting?
Yeah, so going to Australia, as I said, as I'm a nomad and I like to visit new places, I want to, use my life to see other things. I'm not a person who can sit in one place all the time, because I have this, this quest to know more, to learn more, to meet different kinds of people, all that on one side. And then I thought, why not I go to Australia, because I thought my kids can study there and, have a different kind of education. So that was the main reason why I moved to Australia, and then rest is history.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you want to ask me something?
Yeah, so with your experience, so what I understand is you've been in Australia to learn soilless farming.
No. I went to Australia and I had my, of course, I had a rich military experience for sure. And then I had this few years in Dubai, and I also traveled around the entire Middle East in my work, and also parts of Central Asia.
What was that work?
Oil and gas industry. I was I was the logistics director for a very large, very big firm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I looked after purchase as well as logistics for them.
So how did you fell in love with soilless farming?
So I'm coming to that. So when I went to Australia, I did some odd jobs as well, because when you go to a new country, you cannot say I was a general manager in India, I've got 18 years experience and all that. That's fine. But the first thing they ask you is, do you have any experience in Australia? Because the whole culture, everything is different there. So what I did, I applied for some jobs, but I didn't find anyone calling me, or they just said, no, it doesn't fit our thing because you're not worked here, and blah blah blah. So I started a individual consulting firm, one single man consulting firm, basically to help bridge businesses between India, Australia and Middle East, because I had a rich experience. So I thought, why not put it to things? So I made out a little flyer, and to be honest, I did a spam mailing. I just sent to every company. I'm a consultant.
Okay.
I can help you. I'm as an advisor.
So guys, you have to do that. Sometimes you have to reach out. So you have to do spam. You have to send emails. It doesn't mean spamming. You're reaching out.
Yeah, I was reaching out. So, it can be taken as spamming, whatever. But I had no other choice. And then for the first 2-3 weeks, there were no calls. Nobody called me. So it was getting hard, because I had my family and I had to obviously look after my family. Money had to come in. So one day, after 3 weeks of the spam mails going, one company called me up and said, hey guy, we would like to meet you and we have something to talk to you about. So I said, okay. So I went to this company. I didn't know what the products were or the services they provide. I didn't know what they wanted. I just walked in there, and when I walked into they had a huge warehouse. There were acres, really, 2-3 acres of warehouses. And then there were 2 beautiful greenhouses next to it, and I did not understand what the connection was between the warehouse and that greenhouse, or whom it belonged to. So then what happened was, I walked in, and there was a gentleman called Mr. Paul Aiken, and he was the managing director, and I was supposed to meet with him. I was on time, and he was very happy. So I walked into his office, we had a chit chat, and we chatted for a while, and we had some tea and biscuits. And then I said, come, let me take you and tell you what we want from you. So I said, okay. They wanted to tell me about their products. So they took me to the warehouse, and then there I saw, for the first time, they introduced me to something called cocoa peat. And they were in blocks, and some were hydrated and all that lying around. And it's a beautiful warehouse, everything neatly kept. And I like that kind of thing, having been in the military. Then what happened is, he explained about the product, and he said, see, we get these products from Sri Lanka, from 1 or 2 factories where we have a tie-up. We import it into Australia, and we supply this item to the horticultural industry. So I said, but what do you do with this coconut powder stuff? So they said, no, it's used for growing plants. I said, but normally we grow plants in soil, so how do you grow it in this? So he started telling me about it. And he was a person just like me, very passionate about what he does. And his passion rubbed off on me quite a bit. And to be honest, both of us are the same age also. So he then said, come, I'll show you how this cocoa peat is used. He took me to these two greenhouses. One had tomatoes and one I think had cucumbers growing. And I was bold. I was clean bold. I said, wow, this is like, I mean, I didn't have words. You won't believe it. I actually, it's like, when you ask a person, how did you fall in love with this woman or this girl? You have no answer for it because you just fell in love. The same thing happened to me. I said, this is amazing. This is really something amazing. So I decided, no more of this consulting business, doing all this. I'm going to learn this subject.
Lovely.
There began my journey, and these guys loved me a lot. And I did 3 joint ventures for them with 3 Indian companies in Tamil Nadu.
Before becoming a grower in soilless farming.
I mean, this was going on. I was started learning for myself because they knew all the farmers there. They said, you can go and learn there, you can go and learn there. They appointed me as their principal consultant. And there was no compulsion for me to come to their office every day. I could walk in and walk out anytime.
Okay.
Although I was like an employee, I had that privilege. And Paul was nice. He said, see, no problem. Whenever we need you, you give your service, your help. Sometimes you can work from home, you can do whatever you want. So I had all the time in the world. And they started paying me as well.
Right.
So I actually got a job, and a job which did not ask me to stay from 9 to 5.
Right.
I had all the time in the world to go and work on the farms.
So you gave up 9 to 5, you got freedom, you got money,
Yes.
and you got a new journey to begin.
Yes, my journey began learning. So
How long did you take to learn this soilless?
8 long years.
That's a long time. That's a
Yes,
long time.
it's
Seriously.
and you see, soilless agriculture is a very intensive form of horticulture. It's intensive. It's backbreaking. People on the internet and YouTube, they make it look like a push button kind of a technology. They make people think that there's artificial intelligence and you have an app and you press buttons and things happen. If that was the case, the problem of agriculture in the world would be sorted out. We can close down all the universities and research centers and convert them into hospitals and schools and colleges for other training. So, yes, so that was my journey. So after 8 years of learning, I said, okay, I'm going to take this to India because after all, my nation first. So I said, my nation should know more about it because already Australia's got lots of these soilless happening. So that's how I walked into this country. Before I came into the country, I also see, this is how things happen in life. When you found your passion, when you know your journey, your mission, you meet the right people as you go.
Right.
And while I was doing the hydroponic thingy and the soil learning and all, I came across a wonderful person called Miss Peggy Bradley. Peggy Bradley is one of the world's very well-known soilless or hydroponics resource person. So I wanted to set up in India, so I asked Peggy, I want to set up in India, I need your help. And she said, we talked here and there. Then I said, I flew her into India. I also flew in from Australia. And the journey began. So my first project was in a school in Bangalore.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I did not have a land or any place where I can train people, right? So somebody introduced me to the Sandra Ricketts Public School. And then I met the principal. It was a small little school. It was a Catholic kind of school. There was an Irish lady who used to fund that school from Ireland.
Okay.
And they also had a very small orphanage attached to it.
Right.
And they also had one plot of land opposite, which was about 5,000 or 6 odd square feet.
Okay.
So we started a simplified hydroponic. Peggy was there, and the deal was with the school was, we will train 5 teachers and 20 of your orphan children and your school kids for free.
Nice.
You just allow us to use your land.
Nice.
And they said, why not? So that journey began, and the Pet Burrow project.
But
Fill your
that's
stomach.
interesting. That journey began with a cause.
Yeah. The journey began with a cause. Yeah.
I mean, you are starting with growing vegetables using soilless methodology
Yeah.
for the orphan kids,
Yes.
and at the same time, you're also getting to begin the journey for India also.
Yes, and it was not just about growing food by my effort for the children. I trained 5 teachers. I trained 20 of these orphan kids. I made the 20 of them into 5 groups, and I made one teacher as a supervisor.
So they became self-sufficient.
Yes, so in the kids, children learn very fast. These kids learned so fast, and they understood the value of hygiene. They understood how to do seeding, and believe me, they became like my own kids. That is like every time I'm there in the morning, uncle, uncle, they'll be all around me like bees. So it was like that was the journey. And then Peggy had told me that if you have assorted vegetables growing in 100 square feet area, assorted, you can get up to 1 kilogram of assorted vegetable daily.
And that's enough for a family.
More than sufficient. More than sufficient. And what we did, the students from the day they started harvesting, I gave them a weighing scale. They used to weigh it, they used to make notes. So I did a 400 square feet area for them, which means it translates to it should at least give 4 kilograms a day.
Okay.
You will not believe it, at the end of 6 months when we did the averaging, we had 4.3 kilograms per day. And these children, because it was a very poor school, I remember, the children got some basic food, I would say not even nutrition value was not there, it was very bad. I saw the health of those kids improve.
That is transformation actually.
Yes. And you see, my belief in my lifetime is that I've always believed that food is a human birthright. It's a birthright. Right. It's not about a rich person eating good food. Yeah. Every human on earth, it's his birthright that he should have access to good food.
Right. Everybody deserves it.
It is not a luxury. Right. It is not something that you can feel envious about. Right. Everyone should eat good food. Then only, see, why is there so much violence in this world? Because a hungry man is an angry man.
Right.
It brings in many other things. Anger. See, when you're hungry, you think sometimes people think I'm hungry because of the system around me, the society. You get all, you become a total rebel and you do the wrong things. But if you're well fed, if you eat good food, you get all the right chemicals that go into the body, and thereby you become a peaceful person.
Correct.
You'll never get into violence and things like that. So my journey, if you ask me, my mission in life, right now where I teach now in Bangalore at this center where you're sitting, is a 3-month training course for people entering into soilless agriculture. And my intention, my only thing for the world is before I go from this earth, my candle should light at least 500 more candles.
That's lovely.
Yes, I want to light another 500 candles, and I want them to light another 500, and bring in such a beautiful change in this world. That's all I'm here for.
I'm 100% sure that you'll be leaving a legacy behind.
Well,
though you may be not worried about that, but
no, I mean, my journey, as I said, I understand one thing. I came to this world with nothing. I leave this world with nothing. But I definitely would like to leave something for the world, not having taken anything. What did I give the world is more important than what I took from the world. My contribution in a way that it'll bring good to generations to come.
Just wanted to tell them that. So contribution, what CB sir has said, that is the purpose of life.
Yes.
Otherwise, why are we living?
Absolutely. Exactly.
So all those individual contributors out there working in MNCs and corporates or anywhere, individually whatever you are contributing, that will be bouncing back to you with a lot of abundance in value, in a lot of emotional well-being also. So keep contributing. Sir, I'm sorry, I had to interrupt that because that was a very beautiful message which I wanted our audience to hear, because that is the key and that is the essence of life.
You see, Rajiv, we all know that life is limited. Nobody goes out of this world alive. You can't get out of this world alive. You have to die and go. I mean, what do you do in between that birth and death? Is your contribution. And to contribute, to be honest, people think if I have to contribute, they only think first, I have to have money to contribute.
Right.
It's not like that. You see an old woman crossing a street or a road, and you know she needs help. Just run up and say, Mom, Mother, can I take you across the road? Can I help you? A man with a walking stick, he's frail. You take him across the road. You smile at a person, you contributed something.
Exactly.
And if there is a message that I give to everybody is, keep validating each other.
Right.
Keep finding the good in everybody. Be a good finder. Don't be a fault finder, because finding fault needs no education.
Correct.
Anybody can find fault. find the good in others and tell them about it.
If we take a look at the example of these plants and vegetables, I know that it is grown by the growers, but they are growing, they die by feeding us.
Yes.
Even though they're contributing,
exactly,
giving us energy.
Exactly. So when you, like, my thing is, when I die, if I have 1 minute before I die and I ask myself, what did I do in this world? I don't want an answer which says you were a burden to this earth. I would like an answer saying that you unburdened a lot of people.
Sweet.
Yeah, you made somebody's life better, easy. You touched somebody's life. It's all about touching people's lives.
Speaking on that, touching people's lives, and in your professional journey of soilless farming, I'm sure you've touched around. This is what I've learned from your website, cvhydro.in, that you've touched about 11,500 students and still counting. That you've made them into soilless farmers.
Not really. I won't call that. I won't say that. Well, by saying that, I'll be making a wrong statement. Because I have trained people. It doesn't mean that all of them in 2 days or 3 day training program that I do, they become good farmers. Obviously, they've got to practice. I have trained people in small formats like 1 day training, 2 day training, 3 day trainings. Some, I won't say many, but some of them have taken that knowledge and applied it in practically and are doing something with it. But there are also people who have, if nothing else, learned something new. Because you see, I may go to an engineering college, but what I will do with that knowledge, no one can understand, no one will know, nor unless I apply it, I will not know. So there is something called knowledge and there's something called practical experience. So in this 11,000 odd people that I've trained so far in my journey in India, I honestly don't even know many times, because some people don't even come back to you, some stay in touch. And the ones who stay in touch, some of them are saying that, sir, we are yet to get into this because we have a job, we haven't left. But people are getting in. It takes time. I'm like that tortoise and the hare, I go slow. And being a submariner, we always used to go very slow. We are the slowest among any of those naval vessels.
I saw the bumper sticker on your car.
You saw
the bumper
that.
sticker say that we are...
You're following a submariner.
We are
used to moving slow. Because somebody from behind is honking, so he might as well know that I'm a submariner. I move very slow. Slow but surely. So yes, so I train a lot of people in my lifetime, Rajiv, and I continue to do what I'm doing.
I think you're still on your mission.
Yeah.
So if you could just speak about something about your mission,
Yeah.
and where it is going towards your vision.
My mission, Rajiv, as I said, is how to feed this planet, how to ensure that people have good food to eat, how to make it affordable, also very important. And my mission is that we should come to a point where we stop using dangerous chemical pesticides that are causing so much of diseases in this world. It's causing so much of misery. So I have a mission to do that, and my vision is like 500 years ahead, that this planet will have more population as we move forward. What are we going to do about it? So even 500 years later, what I'm doing now should be still relevant or have even become better by technology or technique and things like that. So that's my vision, and I really want to be of some use to this world, to this planet, to the people on this planet, because I love everybody on this planet. I love everyone. All are my friends, my brothers, sisters. It's humanity. And and if I ask God, something is fill my life with a lot of work and give me such a lot of work till I go from this earth. Get what I mean?
Yeah.
Fill my every moment with a lot of work. Give me so much work that till the last day of my life I'll have work to do. And that's all I ask from Almighty God.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It has been an amazing experience coming here, interacting with your students. I always wanted to meet you, and finally I met you. And this talk you made time. Thank you for that.
Hey, thank you.
And I think your journey is totally inspiring. I'm sure there are many more miles to go before we sleep, and we would get to see more amazing things happening in the world of soilless farming
Yes.
because of your actions that you're taking.
Yes.
So, what's going to happen in 2021? What are we looking at?
Oh, in 2021, as I said, in 2020, COVID 19 ate up most of the year, but we were working every day, even during the lockdown. I never take, oh, by the way, I never take a single day holiday in my life. I work every day of my life. And someone asked me, sir, it is Diwali, it is Dasera, aren't you celebrating? Haven't you gone to the temple and things like that? And I say, hello, good morning. For me, every day is Dasara, every day is Christmas, every day is Holi, and the place where I do my work is my temple. My God is here.
Work is worship.
My God is here. My work is my God. My everything. So I don't have to go anywhere really.
Nice.
I just love my work and whatever I do, and I have so many of my students. So I interact with them. They come from different parts of India. They're from different age groups. So again, my learning doesn't stop. My journey continues the same way. And I'm grateful to God that He chose me in this mission. I'm thankful that He chose me. He could have chosen anyone else. But why did He choose me? So I say, thank you, God, thank you. I'm always in gratitude.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful to you for everything. And I have no words to thank Almighty God.
Sweet. On that note, I would also like to thank God, the Almighty, because He gave me this opportunity to be here. There's a divine connection here, I feel. This man has an amazing aura. He is a maverick. He is the enigma unto himself and the others around him as well. So I'm going to look forward to his journey for the rest of his life. I'm going to try my best to be with him, to help him out in any parts of his mission. He'll be giving me the opportunity to work with him, and I'll be meeting such wonderful personalities, such wonderful humans. Also, I'll be sharing those stories with you. Please stay tuned to this journey of Alma Mentor. He is one of those Alma mentors that I've finally met. He is nourishing everybody around him. The first steps that we took, our mother watching, nourishing us, for us to walk, run, and fly, to embrace the future.